My father told me this story. There was a child called Lou in the village who had no parents and was raised by his blind grandfather. But as he grew older, Lou became a very rebellious young man who was also quite difficult and refused seeking work. Lou's grandpa tried all he could do to persuade him to change, but couldn't. Lou not only argued with his grandfather, but also when he watched his grandfather fall to the ground, he stood there looking without responding till the grandfather breathed his last. In addition to repeatedly peering into the local girl's bathroom, everyone in the village despised him as a result of this occurrence. While going along the street, Lou noticed a group of youngsters huddled and yelling from a distance. He arrived and observed the youngsters playing with a black cat. They looked like having a good time. Lou had been parentless since he was a kid, and he grew up with a blind grandfather, so he despised it when those kids had fun. Lou rushed over and forcefully shoved the youngsters away. Lou snatched the black cat, and the cat could only battle fiercely with his legs, clinging to find a way out.
"Give us the cat back,"
a weeping kid demanded, and Lou just snatched the black cat, disregarding the children following him, and headed home. He pulled out a kitchen knife in the house after returning home. Perhaps Lou intended to slaughter this cat. The black cat truly dropped tears in her eyes, pleading eyes, as though hoping Lou would let her go. Lou was astounded as well, because it was the first time he had seen a cat weep. But he remained unmoved. Instead, he had a weird smirk on his face, and in a blink of an eye he swung a knife and slaughtered the cat. The black cat's life was ruthlessly ended by the knife in Lou's hand. Lou wasn't scared of the black cat's eyes. On the contrary, they heightened Lou's wrath, and he proceeded to slash the cat. Next, Lou washed the flesh, heated the water, and cooked cat meat for dinner. Lou heartlessly threw the black cat's skin that was no longer usable on the ground. Lou was happy with what he had done to the black cat after a full dinner, and he gradually fell asleep. Lou lay down on the comfortable bed and promptly fell asleep. In his dream, Lou felt his scalp was itching and scratched it. But it was unsatisfyingly clawing his head with one hand. Lou clasped his hands together and scratched his scalp ferociously. Lou wanted to let go of his hands as soon as he realized something was wrong, but both hands seemed to be stuck. Lou attempted everything he could to remove his hands, but his scalp was torn by himself, from the top of his head to the center of his brows, and a great agony extended from the head to the rest of his body. Lou couldn't stop himself, slowly tearing his skin from top of his head to his face, down to his chest, as anguish crept throughout his body. Lou couldn't stop until his upper body was covered in blood, at which time the cat's meow caused him to turn his head in horror. After seeing everything clearly, Lou looked back, and what transpired in front of him made him panic. The black cat he had just eaten was standing behind Lou, her eyes filled with rage. Lou awoke from this nightmare, sitting on the bed, his entire body drenched in perspiration. When he raised his hand and glanced at his arm, Lou noticed that both arms were covered in crimson scars that resembled cat claws. Lou felt thirsty, walked out of the bedroom, saw the cat skeleton on the unclean table, and got a strange sense in his heart. Surprisingly, there were numerous dead rats lying on the floor. When the cat's skin was nowhere to be seen in the house, he started to panic. Lou appeared to be thinking exclusively about the horrible dream all day. He felt chilly all over. As he proceeded to the spot where he had caught the cat the day before, he was taken aback by a figure. A huge black cat was in that precise spot, gazing at Lou. Lou remembered his nightmare from the night before, and he was so terrified that he turned around and fled home. When he came home, he started to feel drowsy again. The nightmare from the night before had sapped virtually all of his energy, and Lou fell asleep again. This time, Lou was fully aware that he was in a dream, and his head was still aching, despite his desire to control his arm, not to scratch his head. In his dream, Lou continued to rip his scalp with terrible anguish, and the sounds of cats meowing everywhere tormented him. Lou definitely noticed the black cat crouching on the ground nearby, looking at him with furious eyes. Lou was awakened again, his clothing drenched, gasping for air and feeling totally powerless. He returned his gaze to his body. He noticed that there were more scars than the day before, as well as some bloodstains in certain spots. When Lou stepped out of the bedroom and glanced at the pile of bones remaining on the table, he realized he had a solution. Lou searched for a while and found a bag in which he placed all of the cat bones. Lou got his luggage and proceeded to the village loan funeral store, where he asked the owner for some joss paper and gold bars, paper to burn, promising to give the owner money when he had it. When he heard Lou say he wanted to buy some joss papers, he realized Lou had a conscience and perhaps he wanted to burn it down for his grandfather. Lou immediately took the money and proceeded to leave the store without even expressing a word of thanks. He walked silently to a spot where no one passed, which was in the mountains, and seeing that the surroundings were calm in front of him, Lou placed his belongings on the ground. Lou knelt on the ground and began digging a hole. After digging, he inserted the bag of cat bones and covered them with soil. After finishing these, Lou knelt and burned the underworld money he had brought, mumbling supplications in his mouth. When Lou finished praying, he repeatedly bent his head into the cat tomb he had just filled. Lou stood up and walked down the mountain after finishing the job. As he neared the village, Lou occurred to pass by his grandpa's cemetery. Lou glanced at his grandfather's tomb and became enraged. He thought that the result of today was that his grandfather died too young. Otherwise, how could he eat cat meat? He cursed and stomped his grandfather's grave. After a few lines of reprimandedness, it was becoming dark and he didn't dare to remain any longer, so he hastily headed home. Lou sat on the bed at night, unable to sleep, since, although having handled the cat bone problem, he was still concerned. Finally, Lou couldn't fight back his tiredness and fell asleep without realizing it. He was woken up in the middle of the night because he needed to go to the bathroom. He found himself no longer having nightmares, which made him extremely pleased. Just as Lou was about to return to his room and sleep, he noticed two people standing beside the bed. Who is that? This dude's house is in shambles, so there's nothing to take. But as Lou arrived and saw those two, his face instantly became pale. His tone was no longer as powerful as before, and it turned out that these two guys were identical to him. They floated in the air, gently hovering like human skin lanterns. Their lips spat out a dead voice. Where are you? We were produced by your pride, envy, anger, sloth, greed, desire, and gluttony. The two of them were speaking while floating towards Lou, terrifying him to the point of wetting his pants. Lou stared at the two people floating in front of him. A look of terror emerged in his eyes, and he had a violent convulsion. Then a scream burst out from Lou's house. When the couple next door to Lou's house heard it, they hurried over to check what was happening. The elderly man next door came to Lou's door and started calling him. He knocked loudly, but no one responded. Without knowing what else to do, the man kicked the door open and burst in. Inside, Lou had foamed at the lips and collapsed to the ground, his hands covered in scars. A black cat's skin beside him. The old man pushed Lou onto the bed and pleaded with his wife to get a doctor in the village ASAP. The doctor arrived 30 minutes later. Following a thorough examination, the doctor determined that Lou was disease-free. He then said his goodbyes to the old man and left. The old man looked at Lu and felt terrible for him, knowing that Lu grew up rebellious because he had no parents and had been hurt a lot since he was a youngster. When Lu awoke in the morning and opened his eyes to find the old man smiling at him, he fell into tears, realizing that someone cared about him. Lu's heart was affected, and he felt terribly remorseful in his heart as he reflected on what he had done previously and what had transpired in the previous few days, making him full of regret. Lu has changed for the better since then, and he now appeared to be a new guy.